name is Nishad Noor and welcome to Millennium Headlines. This week's top headlines are: every romantic, emotional moment from one heck of a royal wedding. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle became husband and wife, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and the new reigning king and queen of romance on Saturday. Is that an official title? It should be, because the royal wedding, so hotly anticipated and debated, was full of sweet, inspiring, groundbreaking moments that spoke to the couple's unique character. Where to begin? Is it with the heavenly music selections that perfectly melded British and American traditions? The fresh array of blush pink and gentle green hats and outfits that lit up St. George's Chapel? Or how about when Prince Harry raised his bride-to-be's veil, and for one brief moment, even the most hardened of cynics swooned a little inside? Or how about when Prince Harry raised his bride-to-be's veil, and for one brief moment, even the most hardened of cynics swooned a little inside? While Meghan, Prince Harry, and their closest family and attendants waited out the final hours before their big moment, Britain and America's finest put on characteristically colorful display. Among the best dressed was Amal Clooney, an international human rights lawyer and the wife of George Clooney.
For both of them is one of life's great milestones.
They have, Hugh, and all the stresses and nerves beforehand, it's all over now, and you can hear the roars of the crowd echoing in from outside the ramparts. Here they are, coming out of the horseshoe cloister into the lower ward of the castle. There's going to be another roar now as thousands of representatives of all their charities welcome them out here as the winds are great.
You will hear as they come up round the streets of Windsor and finally up the Long Walk will be quite amazing.
They'll just go into the eastern end of the castle, where they'll disappear for a few moments, and then I expect Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh to be leaving.
Pretty unlike anything. It's going to be the longest, I think, procession through the streets of Windsor we've seen in a very long time.
And you mentioned the extraordinary training and precision that goes into this. These horses actually have special training to cope and prepare them for the crowds they're going to see. And here they actually, I'm told, they have earmuffs in their earplugs in their ears to help them cope with the noise of the crowds. And what will be lovely for this mounted escort to see is to see the groom in his Household Cavalry Blues and Royals uniform. I think that will make them feel especially proud to be escorting them.
By our bandstand.
And the role of the military today is so
Trump still planning summit reassures and warns Kim Jong-un. President Donald Trump on Thursday said U.S. and North Korea officials are continuing to prepare for a scheduled diplomatic summit next month, even as Pyongyang threatened in recent days to pull out of what would be the historic first meeting between a North Korean leader and a U.S. president. Trump also reassured Kim Jong-un the North Korean leader would remain in power if he abandons his nuclear weapons program, but warned Kim that North Korea would be decimated if he refuses to strike a deal with the U.S. Trump's comments were his most extensive since North Korea dealt a blow to hopes for a successful U.S.-North Korea summit next month in a series of statements earlier this week. If the meeting happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, we go on to the next step, Trump said. We may have the meeting. We may not have the meeting. If we don't have it, that will be very interesting. We'll see what happens. forces to leave Syria, Putin tells Assad. Russian President Vladimir Putin told Syrian President Bashar al-Assad Thursday that foreign armed forces would leave Syria, according to Syria's state-run news agency Sana. Assad was on a surprise visit to Russia. He and his counterpart hailed the beginning of the political process in Syria amid an ongoing fight against terrorism. Russia emerged as Assad's most powerful backer, helping to put down a rebellion against the Syrian president when it intervened on his behalf in 2015. Iran is another important Assad ally. Among the Hezbollah and other Iran-backed armed groups, Iran has helped prop up the embattled President Assad's visit comes just over a week after Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to Moscow. After meeting with Putin, Netanyahu said Russia was unlikely to interfere in Israel's actions in Syria, despite the Russians' condemnation of Israel's latest airstrikes on May 9. Given what is happening in Syria at this very moment, there is a need to ensure the continuation of military coordination between the Russian military and the Israel Defense Forces, Netanyahu told reporters. In previous meetings, giving statements that were reputedly attributed to or were made by the Russian side, it was meant to have limited our freedom or of action or harm other interests, and that didn't happen. And I have no basis to think that the time will be different. Tensions between the two regional arch rivals came to a head-to-head last week after missiles were launched from Syria targeted Israeli positions in the Golan Heights. Israel claimed Iran fired the missiles in the most direct confrontation between the countries to date and said it struck almost all of Iran's military capabilities in response. Cuba, 110 died in plane crash, 3 survivors in critical condition. The only 3 survivors of Cuba's worst aviation disaster in 3 decades were clinging to life Saturday, a day after their passenger jet crashed in a fireball of Havana's rural outskirts with 113 people on board. In the first official death toll provided by authorities, Transportation Minister Adel Rodriguez said 110 had died, including 5 children. He also announced that a flight recorder from the plane had been located. Carlos Alberto Martinez, director of Havana's Calixto Garcia Hospital, where the survivors were being treated, said doctors are always hopeful that their patients will recover. But he acknowledged that 3 Cuban women were in extremely grave condition. We must be conscious that they present severe injuries, Martinez told a small group of journalists. They are in a critical state. As investigators tried to piece together why the aging Boeing 737 went down and erupted in flames shortly after takeoff early Friday afternoon. It was said those on board, including 102 Cubans, 3 tourists, 2 foreign residents, and 6 crew members who were from Mexico. Eyewitnesses and private salon owner Rocio Martinez said she heard a strange noise and looked up to see the plane with the turbine on fire. It had an engine on fire in flames. It was falling toward the ground, Martinez said, adding that the plane veered into a field where it crashed, avoiding potential fatalities in a nearby residential area. Eyewitness and private salon owner Rocio Martinez said she heard a strange noise and looked up to see the plane with a turbine on fire. It had an engine on fire, it was in flames, it was falling towards the ground, Martinez said, adding that the plane veered into the field where it crashed, avoiding potential fatalities in a nearby residential area. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel said a special commission had been formed to find the cause of the crash. State airline Cubana, which operated the flight, has had a generally good safety record, but is notorious for delays and cancellations and has taken many of its planes out of service because of the maintenance problems in recent months, prompting to hire charter aircraft from other companies. Mexican officials said the Boeing 737-201 was built in 1979 and rented by Cubana from airlines Companies, a small character company that also goes by the name of Global Air. Two wounded from Israeli border, 5 have died. Gaza's health ministry says 2 Palestinians have died days after they were shot and wounded by Israeli gunfire during border protests. The ministry says Saturday the two, aged 20 and 58 respectively, had been in critical condition. The two were shot on Monday when the Israeli troops killed 59 Palestinians in what turned out to be the deadliest days of cross-border violence in recent years. It marked the climax of weeks of mass protests at the borders with Israel. Hamas, the Islamic militant group that rules Gaza, says it aims to relax an Israeli-Egyptian blockade on the territory through the protests. Since the demonstrations began March 30th, more than 110 Palestinians have been killed and more than 2,500 wounded by live fire, according to the health ministry. At OIC, Muslim nations condemn Israel and U.S. call for unity. Muslim nations on Friday condemned Israel and the inauguration of the American embassy in contested Jerusalem as a provocation and a hostility against the Islamic world, while Turkey's president called for action, including a peacekeeping force. A final communique from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Summit in Istanbul reaffirmed the centrality of the Palestinian cause after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the rotating term president of the OIC, called an extraordinary summit. The call came on the heels of a week that has Turkey take a leading role in condemning Israeli actions in Gaza. Monday's killing of 59 Palestinians and wounding of hundreds of others was the deadliest day of cross-border violence in Gaza since 2014 war between Israel and Hamas. As part of its efforts, the Turkish government organized a massive rally and the OIC summit, a show of solidarity. Speaking at the closing of the OIC late Friday, Erdogan said the international community must stop watching the massive massacres from the bleachers as Palestinian youth are killed by Israeli terror, proposing an international peacekeeping force. In its declaration, the OIC said Israel committed savage crimes with the backing of Donald Trump's administration, emboldened by the United States' decision to recognize Jerusalem. Palestinian Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah criticized the U.S. for becoming part of the problem and not the solution, and thereby disqualified itself as a peace process mediator in transfiguring on the Palestinians' historic legal, national rights with Monday's embassy move. The OIC threatened other countries considering following suit, including Guatemala, which has already made the move to Jerusalem with political, economic, and other measures. 9 dead as India-Pakistan trade fire along Kashmir border. 8 civilians, including an Indian husband and wife and 4 members of Pakistani family, were killed when Indian and Pakistan soldiers fired at the border posts and villages along the highly militarized frontier in disputed Kashmir, officials said Friday. An Indian soldier was also killed in the fighting. The cross-border firing and shelling began overnight and spread to dozens of posts in Jammu region of the Himalayan territory, said Indian police officer S.D. Singh. Indian paramilitary officials said their soldiers responded to Pakistani gunfire and shelling, describing it as an unprovoked and indiscriminate. The official said the paramilitary soldier was killed by a Pakistani sniper Thursday night, leading to cross-border firing and shelling at several forward posts. The husband and wife were killed when a shell fired from the Pakistani side hit their home, Indian police said. 2 other civilians were also killed on the Indian side. At least 12 civilians were also wounded and were being treated in hospitals. A Pakistani woman, Kulsum Hossain, and their 3 children were killed when a mortar fired by Indian troops from across the frontier struck their home, local police official Mohammed Amin said. The woman was making food at the time. In a statement, Pakistan Army accused Indian troops of initiating an unprovoked violation of the 2003 ceasefire accord between the two countries along the frontier near Kashmir and targeting the civilian population, including 4 villagers who died Friday morning. According to the statement, the military said Indian fire also wounded 10 people, including 3 children. It said Pakistani troops effectively responded and targeted the Indian post from where the fire came. The military and the artillery exchange was continuing. Pakistan's foreign ministry said the killing civilians were members of a family. As in the past, each country accused the other of initiating the border skirmishes and violating the ceasefire agreement. Indian officials said the latest violence has sent thousands of people fleeing from their homes in dozens of frontier villages to government buildings converted into temporary shelters or to the houses of friends and relatives living in safer places. Bullets and shrapnel scarred homes and walls on both sides. Saying the Indian officer said authorities were evacuating civilians living near the frontier in armored vehicles. The fighting earlier this year also sent the thousands of border residents to temporary shelters for days. Friday and lodged a strong protest over the killing of civilians along the frontier. The ministry said Indian forces have carried out more than 1050 ceasefire violations and resulting to deaths in 20 civilians and injuries to 117 others. Selfie craze claims another boy's life. The teenage boy who sustained injuries while taking a selfie in front of a moving train died while undergoing treatment at Chittagong Medical College Hospital on Saturday, reports UNB. The deceased was Mohammed Hassan, 15, son of Alauddin Ahmed in Lalbagh area. Ahmed said Hassan was admitted to CMCH on Friday as he and his friends sustained injuries while taking a selfie on the train tracks. Later in the night, his friend Muhammad Sahid, 16, son of Abdur Sattar, scrambled to injuries. On Friday, 2 friends were returning home after Jummah prayer. On the way, they were taking a selfie standing aside the rail tracks when a train hit them, said Sub-Inspector Alauddin Talukdar. Angry traders lay siege protesting at phone set seizure. Infuriated by raiding of handset shops by custom officials, mobile phone shop owners and their salespersons blocked the Pantapat Road in front of a Boshundara City shopping mall on Saturday evening. The Customs Intelligence and Investigation Directorate officials seized around 100 sets, claiming that they were imported without paying duties. Denying such allegations, the desperate traders and salespersons laid a siege at the Pantapat Road and stopped the CID officials from leaving the market, said witnesses. A meeting between the businessmen and the officials was underway when the report was filed at 9:30 p.m. News agency UNB adds a team comprising of Customs Intelligence, revenue officials, Rapid Action Battalion, and Dhaka Metropolitan Police started over 3-hour-long raid simultaneously at different spots from 11 a.m. Apart from the shopping malls, the team conducted a drive at a house in Moakhali area and seized machineries and illegal parts for making fake phone sets, UNB reported, quoting a press release on Saturday. After the drive, Director General of CID, MD Shahadul Islam, said the government has been losing huge amounts of duty due to sale of these unauthorized mobile sets, which mostly enters the country through personal baggage. These illegal phone sets are not recorded in BTRC files, he said. We will show zero tolerance to check selling of illegal mobile phone sets. We are committed to bring the syndicate and makers under legal action, he added. He said the government will not allow selling an unauthorized illegal mobile phone sets in Bangladesh market. Our drive will be continuing regularly in the coming days. watching Millennium Headlines. This has been Nishat Noor. See you next week.